Right, so going on to the next bit, we'll go down. The next bit is task B, task 2B. The daily hire rate depends on the car ID. The car's worksheet stores the daily hire rate for the car ID. Use a lookup function and the car's worksheet to complete the daily hire rate column in the rentals worksheet. Sounds complicated, so let's go back and see if we can simplify it a bit. This is the value, the daily hire rate they want to complete, and we're going to use the car ID to find it. So now we'll go over to the lookup table, the data, and you can see this. The car ID is in column A, column 1, which it nearly always is for a lookup. Now they don't want to know the model, they don't want to know the make, but they want to know the daily hire rate. So they're the two columns that we were going to need. So what happens with a lookup, vertical lookup, is like the old-fashioned phone book. You go down until you find the name or the car ID in this case that you want. So it's that one. Once you've gone down and found it, you go across until you retrieve the figure that we want, daily hire rate. Then Excel takes that figure and puts it into that column there. That's a vertical lookup. To do it, make sure you click where you want your answer to go, and then click on the insert function button. Find the VLOOKUP. Now the lookup value, that's going to be the car ID, which is the first one in the column. Let me go over. The problem with the VLOOKUP, as soon as you click on another one, it puts something in here. So let me just escape back from that and turn that off a second and go back to the exam paper. Read the line in the question you're doing. It should tell you in that line, in bold, one of which will be the lookup value. In this particular one, the first one is the car's worksheet. The second one is the value we want to find. So it's not that. We need the value that we're going to use to find it. So that the only one left is the car ID. So we suspect we need the car ID. That will be the lookup value. You can confirm that if you go back to your worksheet and then go back to the lookup table, and we suspect it's car ID. We want that to be the first column heading, and it is. It's the column heading in the first column. Nearly always the first column in the lookup table will be the lookup value. So to simplify that, if you go back to your question, we know it's not the car's worksheet, because that's a worksheet. So the next one is the daily hire rate. That's what we're asked to find. So the only one left is the car ID. So you go back to your worksheet and then go back to the lookup table. You're hoping to find the first column has a heading, in our case car ID, whatever you've just found out. You know, when you do the VLOOKUP, click on the insert function, click on the VLOOKUP. This lookup value is the car ID. So you just have a scan across. We now see that the car ID in our data table is in column D. We're in row 2, so we click in D2. That's the lookup value. That's probably the hardest part to work out, but really it tells you in the paper and it gives you a big clue in the lookup table being the first column. Now we'll move on to the table array, and make sure you click into these boxes before you do anything else. The table array is on the other sheet, so we can click on that and select the lot. Now these are sometimes named, i.e. instead of it saying cars A1D23, it will say something like lookup table or cars table, cars, whatever, some name. If it's named, that's fine. They may have asked you to name it, but we'll worry about that when we see that in another exam. But this one isn't named, so it's really important that we lock these cell references by using the F4 key. It puts the dollar signs in between each letter and number. Really important, and we'll look at in a second what happens if you don't do that and how you could notice that you haven't done it. Whilst we're also here, you want to look up the next one here says column index number. So whilst we're on this page, bearing in mind that as soon as you click on the other one it will jump back, let's look up what column index we want, i.e. which is the number of the column that we want. So that's column 1, that's column 2, column 3, column 4. So the one that we want, the rate, is in column 4. So in here we can type number 4. Notice when I clicked in this one, the background screen changed, the sheet changed. So if you do click in it and you think, oh, how about which one is it, you have to go back. As soon as you go back you start adding more data onto there, so it's handy to work that out beforehand. You just type the number 4, check everything that's okay there. And then the last one, because we're looking for an exact match, it's not a range of values, you type false. You can always look down here to its explanation, but we want an exact match, which seems to be nearly always, all of them, 100% of the exams I've seen from Edexcel seem to be an exact match. So we write the word false in there. Check there's no red writing in there, check everything's okay, and then click OK on that, and then we can drag that down, replicate it, and then it's a good idea to always go back and check, like everything, we should check everything. So if we go back and let's have a look, the LD1 is 56, so find LD1, there it is, and that's 56, and let's have a look at one down here, so HA1 is 40, HA1 is 40, so yeah, it seems to have worked okay, and it's worth trying one right down near the end. That's this HJ2 is 31, HJ2 is 31, so yeah, I'm happy that that's worked. What I'm going to do now, I'm just going to show you what happens if you don't lock it, if you don't lock the lookup table. So I'm going to go back into it, I'm going to FX, VLOOKUP, the lookup value we know is that, the table array is this, so I'm going to select it all, and this is where I'm going to deliberately go wrong and not lock it. Column index is 4, and it's false. It all looks fine, hasn't complained anything, go like that, still hasn't complained, all looks good, drag it down. Alright, now the NA. The NA suggests, now this is a problem, and this is why it's so important that we do lock it, because if it's a small table that, like let's say that we've only got, or we was only putting on like 7, these 9 rows are actually incorrect. But let's say our data was only 9 rows big and we didn't have any of this data, you wouldn't notice it's incorrect because there'd be no error. It's only because we got to the end of the table and you've got this NA coming up. If you click on there, we usually say value not available. The fact that you've seen an NA, as soon as you see that anywhere there, you go, oh, I forgot to lock my table. And again, if we're looking up here, the top one's right because it says look in from A1 to D22. So we go A1, which is up here, D22. So that's correct. But now if we go back and click into this one, let's say, so go into that one, click in there. So it's saying, look in this one, D15 is the car ID, but it's saying A14 to D35. We go back to here. A14 starts there, and it says now my table is down to here. So it's fine in the top half, it will return a value, but down here there's no value to return, so it can't find it. Because every time you go down one, when you drag it down like so, Excel adds a number to the one that you've already got. So D2 becomes D3, D4, because you want to step down one, makes sense. But we don't want that on the lookup table. We want it to stay always A1 to D22. We want to make it an absolute cell, not a relative cell. I've got a video on absolute and relative cells if you need to have more explanation on that, but it is one that catches people out. The other way around it is by naming this cell. Now if I name it now, let's just call it car LUT a better term. Now if I go in here, I'm just going to delete all of this. Go back to this, delete that. If I go VLOOKUP, and the value is still the same. The table array, now I can type it straight in, but I'm just going to select it. And you notice now it's called it car lookup table. Now here you don't have to lock it, it's already locked it, by the actual way of naming it locks it. But it doesn't do you any harm to hit F4. To get in the habit of hitting that F4 key always. If it's been named, then no problem. But if you don't do it and it hasn't been named, your VLOOKUP won't work. So column 4, false, okay that, and now if you go down and look at, let's say, one from further from the bottom, that number has changed, the D21, you can see that's highlighted blue, but it's referring to the table name car lookup. So now I haven't named it now, I'm going back into third time, lookup value is that. The array is that. Now I've turned the name off. I must hit the F4, column 4 and false. You can write 0, 1 or 0 for here. I've got the L in there. But just stick to the false, it just makes it a bit clearer. So someone if they're not used to it. And then drag it down. So now down here, we know that D20 has worked its way down to its number D20, which is the correct one. But notice this A1 hasn't become A21 or D44. It's still D22 and A1. So it's still looking in the top corner of the V. Okay. It's actually a lot simpler than all of that doing it. And if you stick to those steps that I said, click on the insert function, find your VLOOKUP. If you haven't worked out your ID, it's the first one in the lookup table. So you go back to your worksheet, find that, and it's that one. And that table array is, you just select all of the data in the table they've given you, and then hit F4, choose the column or number the column that you want. It's column 4 in our case, and always write false if they want an exact match, and OK it. So that step is relatively straightforward. It's only where the complications come in it gets complicated, but if you follow those steps, and I've got an ebook down in the link below that covers those steps, then you'll be okay. Okay, now we've finished the VLOOKUP, they've asked us to print out some evidence showing the formula used. Again, as mentioned before, it would have been better if they let us finish all of the formulas and functions, then print out the evidence. But in this particular exam, they've asked us to print it out one by one. It's rather annoying. Print out of your rentals worksheet showing the formula used. This is the important line, make sure the formula are not truncated. And it says remember to put your name, candidate number and centre number. They should already be on your print preview because we done it in the last formula printout. The only time that we will need to add the name, centre number again for the printouts will be when we do a chart. They've also asked us to resave the spreadsheet. Okay, so let's go back to the spreadsheet. And first thing we need to do is to turn it to formula view. So I'm already on formulas, but normally you'd be on home. So you want to go to the formula ribbon, click on that, and over here is a show formulas button. As I hover over it, see there's a control plus the grav key. That's a shortcut for doing it. It's quite a handy one. If I click on the button, you see now it's gone. The data that is just pure data has stayed as data, but any data that has got a function or a formula behind it, the data's gone and it's showing the formula or the function. Now that keyboard shortcut key, I'm just pressing Control and Grab. That's the key to the left of the number 1 key, and you see it just flicks between the two, so it's quite handy to remember that easy shortcut. Speeds things up a little bit. But you notice here, one of the lines on the exam paper was make sure no columns are truncated. This column here, column F, is fine. You can read all of the if statement. This column here, you can't. Look, it ends on the D22 and you've still got column 4 and false. Even though you've done that VLOOKUP perfectly, you won't get the full points because they can't see it all from the printout. They won't be able to see this line up here from the printout, remember, they'll only see this column here. If they can't read it all, you don't get any points, or you don't get the full points. So it's really important to double click or resize, however you do it. You can drag it, double click, or use the ribbon menu to make sure that all of the function is showing in the column. And also, because I want to make sure it all fits on one page, a reasonable size, I'm just going to double click or resize these ones that aren't really important on the formula view. And I'm going to give a bit of space. I'm not going to re-click that one, I'm going to leave a bit of space. If I double click it, it puts it up really close. I like to make it nice and easy for the examiner or marker to mark it. So now if we go to the file print, or so file print, it takes us to the print preview. If I go back, Control and P, keyboard shortcut, gets you there. And you see that's actually not too bad. That fits on one page, so it's 1 of 1. And that's looks quite small here, but it's on the screen. It's about half size of what A4 actually is. So I think that would print out okay. But what I could do is enlarge it a little bit. I'm just going to get rid of this column here before I do that. So just shrink that down to that. Control P to go back to print preview. Then in this page setup box, click on that. I could set it to adjust scaling to, I don't know, say 115. Click OK, and that's enlarged it all a bit better, so it makes it a bit easier to see. The other really important thing is make sure that the A, B, C and 1, 2, 3, the row and column headings, is there. That is in the page setup, in the sheet, and it's these 2 tick boxes here. Well, it's row and column headings and also grid lines. We don't need to worry about the grid lines on this particular one because there's borders I've already put on for us. If there was no borders, you'd need grid lines on there. So grid lines and row and column headings for any formula printouts, that must be on. This particular exam, they've already turned it on for us by default, but most of the exams, or half of the exams I've seen at least, don't have it on. You don't need it on, and you shouldn't have it on for data view printouts, but all formula view printouts you must have it on. So that's in the page setup, sheet, and it's grid lines and row and column headings. So okay, that everything looks okay. So you didn't need to enlarge that one, so it doesn't matter if you don't do that step, but you do need to make sure you've got the row and column headings on. So your name, student number and centre number is already on there from our previous printout. Do a double check everything looks okay, everything's all there, it's on page 1 of 1, hit the print, and then go off and get your print out and double check that as well. Make sure everything is on the printed page as it's supposed to be. And what we want to do before we move on to the next bit is we want to go back, and we're going to need to, if we go back to the exam paper, they're going to ask us to calculate some formulas. That will be in the next video, but what we will need to do is we're going to need to turn this back to data view so we can work with it. So we just use click on that one, or use the keyboard shortcut, Control Grab, and you see it's all messed up the layout. So I'm going to click on this little button up here, this little triangle in the top left hand corner, and then double click on the borders between any column, and then that will resize it all in one go. just so I can do the work again. It has asked me to do it. It will ask me to do another printout of formula, so I'm going to have to go through that same process I just did by the show formula and resizing again. But yeah, that's a strange. This is a strange exam on this particular one, asking us to do it 3 times instead of the once. Right. So the next video is how to do a semi-complex formula, doing some maths on these numbers, and then there's a sort and a filter, I believe, and a chart. Please subscribe to the channel if you want to get notifications on all of the functional skills, IT functional skills videos that are coming out. And if you have any questions, put them down in the comments and I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible.